Well, good afternoon again, everybody. This is Richard G., and this is Jersey Talk Radio. We're coming to you from the Flemington Car and Truck Country Broadcast Center here at 127 Main Street, right here in Flemington. The next show is The People Side, A Fresh View with David White, and David is here, and why don't we get started? David, how are you?
I'm very good, Richard. Thanks very much. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in.
Okay. Sometimes that's as good as it gets, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to do something a little different yesterday because most of the shows that I've had so far have focused on business and organizational issues from an organizational perspective.
Okay.
And I wanted to talk today about career planning and career development, both from an individual, personal, but also from an organizational perspective. Because a lot has changed in that whole field, and there's some new thinking that's going on that I think would be valuable for people on both sides of the coin to be aware of.
Okay.
For me, it sort of started a long time ago. I think I mentioned to you once that I was an adjunct professor up at Fairleigh Dickinson for about 6 years after I got my industrial psych degree there. And I had a student, and we had a break. It was a long course, 2.5 hours. So we had a break, and I could see that this one young guy was very upset. He was just very agitated. So I went up to him. I said, what's going on? And what he told me, in essence, was that he was a senior. He was going to be graduating that May, which was, like 4 months away. And unlike all of his friends, he didn't know what he wanted to do. And I looked at him, and I said, okay, tell me what you've done for the last 21 years that would prepare you to make a career decision for the rest of your life. And he kind of looked at me strangely. I said, what have you been doing? And he said, well, I've been in school. And I said, exactly. And I said, do you think that prepares you to make that decision? And he says, well, all my friends are making it. And I said, I'm guessing that 60 to 70% of your friends are going to be doing something very different 10 years from now than what they think their career is going to be now.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because I say the reality is being in school does not prepare you for making that kind of a choice. You haven't had enough life experience. And I said, look, cut yourself some slack, I said, people think they know what they want, and some of them do. And those are the lucky ones. And I know of some kids that, my daughter was one, for instance.
My daughter also.
Yeah, early on. She settled on nursing, and she loves it. But that's the exception rather than the rule.
True.
And, I don't know where, I guess there's sort of an expectation because kids are forced to choose majors and things like that. And there's an expectation that you're going to know what you want to do. And it's so ridiculous. It's just because and what I told him was, I said, look, find something that you're interested in, that you have an interest, you want to know more about it, and then go out and find out what kind of work is available in that area and try it and find out what you like and what you don't like about the jobs that you get. It's really, to some degree, a trial and error type of thing. So... And that came back to me a lot later because when I was working for BASF, one of the things I ended up doing was I helped them conduct the first employee survey they had ever done. Now, this is a German-owned company, and this was kind of unusual for them to promote that kind of upward communications from employees. But one of the issues that came out was the absence of any kind of career development or career planning from the company side. And so in follow-up to the survey, I was part of a team that helped design a new career development system.
Okay.
And it was probably one of the most interesting things I ever had the opportunity to do because we really came up with some unique and different ideas in that whole area. We got some help from some people who have with a lot of expertise in that area, and they provided some of the intellectual capital, and then we applied it. And it was a great project, and I think a lot of the things that we thought of and that we utilized in that system remain very valid for today.
You know, I used to have Lisa Brady on the radio, who was superintendent at Central.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to argue with her because I didn't like the fact that when kids are a freshman, they're trying to push them to say what they want to do. And it just didn't make any sense to me.
No.
I knew when I was a freshman I wanted to be an artist, but I didn't know what I was going to be doing with that.
Right. Yeah, and the problem is it puts these pressure on the kids, so they feel that there's something wrong with them if they're not sure.
Sure.
And that's the last thing they need, because then they force themselves into, putting square pegs into round holes when they really shouldn't be doing that. And he said, well, all my friends are going on and they're going to graduate school. And I said, yeah, and a lot of them are going to end up studying something that they're never going to use in their lives.
My sister-in-law graduated as a chemist.
Mm-hmm.
She then, at one point in her life, owned a small printing company.
That's as close to chemistry as she ever came.
And now she worked as a chemist for a while.
Did she?
Yes. She worked with live AIDS virus.
Whoa.
And then her and her husband now, he sells books, school book fairs.
Mm-hmm.
And now, and I take it back, she just got another new job. She's a science teacher now in high school.
All right. Well,
so,
is she using her chemistry there?
Obviously, I'm sure.
Okay. But in a totally different way than she thought of.
But and I've heard this before, when my father started working, it was you get the job and you never leave it.
Sure.
I've heard that people today might have up to 5 to 10 different careers in their life.
And up to 7 to 10 different jobs.
Yeah.
Is not unusual.
Now, I worked at one job for 21 years, and if things would have gone the way I would have liked it, I probably would still be there.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's still that's a good stint.
Yeah, that was 21 years that went by very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, where they went to. But, I think what you're saying is perfectly I would hate to be a kid again and thinking about what kind of a career I wanted.
Well, to think that you should know and that you should have an idea, that you should know what you want to do for the rest of your life, right? With so little real life experience, is just totally unrealistic. And studying something is not the same as working in it. It's
True.
just not the same. I mean,
Very true.
So it was an interesting conversation. I think he left feeling a little bit better, like he wasn't so down on himself, because he was feeling pretty badly about himself. It's like, what's wrong with me? I don't know. Everybody else knows.
Mm-hmm.
And my reaction was, no, not really. They don't really know. They're sort of pretending because they think they should, and staying in school is safe in a lot of cases.
Well, that is true.
That's the one thing they've always known. Right, so we'll just stay in school and study for a few more years. I mean, it boggles my mind when I meet the number of people who went on to school to become lawyers and are not practicing law.
Mm-hmm.
is just it's incredible. So it's hard on young kids. It really is hard on young kids. And my advice to them always is, get something that you're interested in and then find out ways to work in that area, and go talk to people who are doing it and find out what they like about what they're doing and what they don't like about what they're doing. Because the reality is it's called work for a reason. But by the same token, we spend so much time working not to feel that it's adding something positive to your life other than just paying for the bills, to me is just a shame.
I think that's the way my father felt, because he hated his job.
Yeah.
But it was, well, first of all, my father had only a 5th grade education.
Right.
Then almost 5 years in the Army.
Right.
during World War II. He hated his job.
He probably went through the Depression.
He did. Oh yeah. He worked for the Conservation Corps during the Depression,
Okay.
planting trees out in Arizona or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So he took what he was not a he worked,
Right.
but the problem was he didn't have the education to get a good job,
Right.
and he hated going to work. I remember as a little kid hearing him talking. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to grow up and hate working.
Yeah, that's the model most of us probably get because, I mean, if you look at the engagement data, most people are not engaged in their work. It's a means to an end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I noticed it in the Army. I had so many guys say, oh, I'm just going to stay in because
It's safe.
I'm getting, I got to, well, I know some of these guys came from really bad situations.
Sure.
And the one kid came from Watts out in California and said, I've never had clean clothes, a place to sleep all my life. I'm staying with this place.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what I need to do here.
And the danger is he gets sucked into a certain kind of life if he goes back home.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So, and he said, I think he had joined. He said, I got 17 more years and I can retire.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to, I'm going to be a young man. I could do something else then.
My dad used to talk about playing poker with a bunch of engineers, and they were like, early 20s. And some of the, bunch of engineers that work for Exxon.
Okay.
And they're 22 years old, and they're talking about how great it's going to be when they retire, when they're 65. And it's like, but what about the 42 years
in between?
In between? He said he couldn't just understand that kind of thinking. And he studied in school to be an accountant, and he came out and he absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
And not only did he hate it, he wasn't very good at it because he kept making mistakes. And I don't know if I told you this story before, but he ended up going to a man who had been a doctor, and this was before the Good Samaritan laws,
Mm-hmm.
and had stopped at a car accident and tried to help a victim in the accident, got sued, got stripped of his medical license, and destroyed his career.
Sure.
And he reinvented himself. He went back to school, became an engineer, and went forward from there. And my dad went to talk to him, and the man listened to him, and he said, "You've got to get out of accounting." He said, "Otherwise you're going to become very sick." And he did.
And that is true. I met a guy, when I came back out of the Army, I went back to college for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And I met a guy who was in Dayton, Ohio. There was a store called Elder Bierman's, and he was Mr. Bierman's personal secretary. And had been his personal secretary for a long while. He was going back to school. He was in his late 30s, this guy.
Really?
He was going back to school to become a marine biologist.
Wow.
So I've always wanted to do that. And he said, Mr. Berman's not going to be around forever.
Right.
And he's paying for me to go to school. I mean, this guy had a very good situation because
Right.
obviously he was a very good personal secretary.
And he was going to be supported by this benefactor.
So I've often wondered whatever happened to him. But I'd been in the Army. He had life experience. The rest of the kids in the class, nothing. They just come out of high school. So we're in there. Him and I are tearing it up.
Yeah.
Talking about a lot of things. And
yeah, that was just foreign to the younger kids.
But I also had, when I was, I guess, a teenager, I did art all the time. And I had an uncle who was, actually it was a great uncle. It was my grandfather's brother, who was a farmer in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, keep the artwork going because you can work for yourself. What I like is I'm a farmer. I work for myself.
Okay.
I create my time. I do what I need to do.
I'm my own boss.
And that's it. And he just said, that's the way you should be. I can remember him. We were at a family reunion.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sitting at the picnic table, and he's telling me that.
Yeah. Well, good for him. Good for him because, so many people don't follow any kind of passion that they have.
That's true.
And as a result, I think they miss out on a lot.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a while to find out what that passion is. Now, the system we set up at BASF was really interesting because it really turned upside down some of the different ideas about career development. As an example, the idea for most people when they think about career development is that they're going to have some kind of a career path or a career ladder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually based on jobs.
Sure.
And we threw that whole notion out the window
Okay.
because jobs are basically unstable. They're changing all the time. And the reality we've seen in the last 10 years, they go away. Jobs, I always used to tell people, the rungs are being taken out of the ladder. Forget about the ladder. It's not a stepwise, straight line kind of a process. It just doesn't work that way anymore. And instead of focusing on jobs, what we encouraged people to do was to focus on professions.
Okay.
Because while professions also change, they're not as unpredictable and the change is not as rapid as it is in individual jobs. Therefore, if something's constantly changing, you can't plan. If it's constantly in a state of flux, there's no point in planning. And that's the situation with a lot of jobs this year. If you think back about what you did, when you started out and what you were doing at the end, were there changes in when in that your first job with Newsweek?
Well, actually, the change was we went with computers.
Okay, right.
And I never thought as a graphic designer I would ever be sitting in front of that. Wouldn't, if somebody would have told me that, I'd said, "Are you kidding me?"
Why would I do that? Yeah, you couldn't predict that.
And then we found out how important the computers were.
Right.
And it did change. My first job was as a board artist. That's not B-O-R-E-D, but B-O-A-R-D.
Oh, you've got it.
A board artist. And we did paste up, and we'd paste up the type and position and stuff for brochures and things like that. That was long before computers.
Mm-hmm.
We did it all by hand.
Yeah, you were doing it manually. Sure.
Computers now do it. The people at Newsweek said, "How come you got this so quickly?" I said, "Well, I'm just pasting it up in my mind. I can understand. I can see, okay, this body of type's going to go here. This one's going to go there." I said,
Well, you embrace the computers.
You know what? I found out that it was, at first I thought, oh, no. And then I found out, this is really cool. This is really something that I like.
Yeah.
And then it became, there was me and one other guy, and we became the guys that were trying to find new ways of doing things.
Okay, and new ways of using it.
Yeah, or breaking it, if we could break it.
Okay.
And we tried all kinds of things.
Right.
Found out all kinds of things that nobody knew that would work. And I think that's what kept me really inspired.
Because it was new and it was interesting, and you kind of fed off that.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
For a lot of people, it takes them out of their comfort zone.
Yeah. But I looked forward to doing things.
Mm-hmm. Right, and trying new things.
Yeah.
But so what we told people is you need to think of your career as more of think of it as a spider web, which means that there's lots of different ways to get to any particular position, as opposed to a straight line, step-by-step kind of a process. And that what you should be focusing on is staying current with your profession, because ultimately that's your only source of security.
Sure.
Now, the program, what we set up there, I think BASF, expected us as a team to come back with a program that would help people plan their careers. But we took it a step further and really created a system in that what we did was set up a system that tried to balance the career planning with the company's future talent requirements.
Okay.
And that was the thing that really made it very, very different. So it wasn't just something that the company was doing for employees because they wanted it, but it was also something that was going to be very important to them in the future in terms of what talent were they going to require and what were they going to need in the future that people could factor into their thinking as they created their career plans.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so it was really two sides. It was both the individual benefit and the company benefit in terms of the the person got to think and plan about their career in a different way than they had before. And the company was benefiting from the standpoint of getting people ready to meet their future talent requirements.
Okay.
And so it was a very unique thing. It's still always the individual's responsibility for their career.
Sure.
You can't take responsibility of that away from them. But you can support it. And that's what we said the company's responsibility was. Now, the program was entirely voluntary. People didn't have to get involved if they didn't want to. But this is when I would say to people, it is voluntary, but understand, if you choose not to participate, here's the risk you're taking. If your skills and your knowledge atrophy, if, as a graphic designer, you don't become comfortable and proficient in using a computer, which is a huge trend in your profession right
Exactly.
now, right? I said, you are going to be very vulnerable. And the days of working for one company for 30 years are done.
Yep.
And the only job security you're going to have is the knowledge and the skills that you possess. That's going to make you marketable. And if you let them lag, you're going to be vulnerable.
See, I think my son's very lucky because he went to RVCC. He wants to be a middle school gym teacher, but he's got to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's going to Kane. He's going to graduate next December. But he substitute teaches on the days he's not at school.
Okay. So he's getting some experience.
And so he's understanding. He's not walking into a classroom cold and going, oh, no, I don't know if I like this.
Right.
He comes home with stories. Oh, these kids were silly. They did this. I loved it. It was great.
Okay.
But he's getting that experience to know what he's going to be up against.
Yeah.
Once he's out of school.
Yeah, and in a way, it's a shame that the old apprenticeship programs are gone.
That's just what I was thinking. Yeah, that's just exactly what I was thinking because that's how people found out.
Well, that's how people learned.
Yep.
That's how they got prepared for their profession, and in actually doing the work itself, they learned whether or not that was something they wanted to continue to do or not.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly.
So, it was interesting. One of the interesting parts of the program was the way that we went, or the system, was how we went about trying to get the company to identify its future talent requirements. What we did was we created something we call profession development centered committees. And so we took professions like finance and purchasing and engineering, and we gathered senior leaders in that area. And we took them through a process whereby we would identify not only the profession, but then the sub-disciplines. Because, engineering is a profession, but then you've got mechanical engineering,
Mm-hmm.
chemical engineering,
Mm-hmm.
right? Electrical engineering, very, very different, areas of engineering. Same thing with things like medical. And every profession you look at, you can find those kinds of sub-disciplines. Same thing for, even in human resources. You're going to find separate professions with regard to selection and recruiting and compensation and benefits. And my area of organizational change and development is often thought of as a subdivision or a sub-discipline of human resources.
Okay.
And then what they had to do was they had to identify in each of those areas what they thought the critical trends were in that profession, and they did that by going out and interviewing people in other companies that they had contacts, and they went out and talked and said, what's coming at this profession? So as an example, one of the big things that emerged for the finance was the whole issue of globalization. You had to know how that was going to affect you financially.
Sure.
And that was a big change. And it was just, it was starting to sink in then. So and then we took all of this information in terms of the competencies, and the competencies included generic and technical competencies. Technical competencies were the one that made the profession what it was. All right. So for you as a graphic artist, it would have been, your ability to draw and things like that specifically. Yeah, you needed other things in terms of being able to communicate and write, and those are generic competencies that cut across all the professions.
But, yeah, I was going to say that's in any profession.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to talk with the people you're working with.
Right.
You've got to be able to talk with the people who are above you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even the ones below you.
Absolutely. But I remember the first time we were sat down with this group of vice presidents to talk about the finance profession, and we started with, okay, well, what are the critical capabilities and competencies that people at your level need to have? And they rattled off communications, being able to influence people, planning and development, all these very generic competencies. And finally, we looked at them, and they had maybe presentation skills, things like that. Mm-hmm. And finally, one of the people in the room said, "Well, how would I know that person is in finance?" And it's like, oh, well, you need this, and then they started to rattle off all the financial things, competencies,
Sure.
that were really at the core of that profession. And we took all of that information and we put it on the internet. So when people did their planning, that was there. In other words, if they wanted to be a financial professional, they had the opportunity to see what this company thought they were going to need from people in the future, so they could factor that in, so people weren't doing their planning in a total vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really kind of cool, the way the whole thing worked out. One of the things that we did a lot of work on too was the whole issue of, and I think I've talked with you about this before, we created what we call developmental experiences.
Okay.
Because adults don't learn by training. They're not kids. They don't do things, because you're told you need to learn how to do this. That doesn't work for adults. They have to have a reason why they need to learn something. You learn computers because you had to do the graphic arts, and the demand, you needed to use this instrument because it allowed you to do it much more effectively and quickly, correct?
Well, I mentioned something to Michael, my first guest.
Right.
There was a time that Newsweek went to Max and Photoshop was introduced, and we had a woman come in who was getting $500 a day and staying at the Waldorf to teach us Photoshop.
Oh, I remember you telling me this story.
Every time we'd ask her something, she'd look in the book.
Right, and read to you.
So I went to the powers that be and said, nothing against her, but we don't need her.
Yeah, you're just wasting our time, really.
And I had 13 people, and why this triggered on me was the fact that all 13 of us, I sat down and said, now we're going to learn this. You try this, you try that, you try. And if you know, and then people would just be so excited. Look what I found out how to do.
Yeah. It's a discovery process.
And then we'd all put it together. Yep. And it worked.
And if you didn't have to put it together and do something with it, it wouldn't have been the same.
Yeah. It became, I don't want to say a game, but almost like a game. Mm-hmm. Look what I discovered. Look what I found. Hey,
yeah,
get
and
this.
look what we can do with this.
Yeah. And we found out stuff, the same with the computers too. Found out things that nobody told us that we could do. Mm-hmm. But we found out that we could do.
Right. Well, so what we did in the course of developing these competencies, we then said, okay, how can a person learn how how can they become more proficient in these? What kind of a work experience can they get that will help them become proficient in this? Training is fine, but there's nothing that is substitute for actually having to use it and do something meaningful with it.
Sure.
And apply it. And so that was also built in. And we also, and now the role of the manager became critical in terms of it was up to that individual to support the person. It was up to the manager to support the individual if they wanted to try to develop competencies in their chosen profession. The work experiences were already there sitting for him or her to look at. it was up for them to use their influence to try to get the person those experiences.
Now, on top of that, I'm wondering, one of the great things about, and I don't want to dwell on my career, but the great thing about Newsweek was we saw a finished product each week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
it wasn't a long-term thing.
Yeah, and I think when you can see the finished product and you know you had a part in it,
Oh, yeah.
that's very rewarding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've done research on this, and the further you are away from the end result, the less the person's motivation is.
I could understand
as they
that.
get closer. Yeah. That's one of the reasons why they want you to set goals and to visualize the outcome, because in the process of doing that, it in a sense brings it closer, because now and that helps your motivation. So, and the other thing that goes with that is your motivation is higher when you're working with other people on it. And you were working as a team. You were working as a group, as opposed to one individual doing it by him or herself.
We were a family.
Yeah, because you were all going for the same thing.
And and everyone, and I think I told you before, I had to hire a couple of people. I always hired people that I thought wanted my job.
Right. I remember you telling me that.
Because those guys, if I wasn't there, they're the ones that are going to be.
They were going to jump into the breach.
Yeah.
Yep. Sure.
But I love that, because also I didn't have to say, hey, we got to do this. I'll do that. Let me do this. People were willing. I'm here. Let's get some work done.
Mm-hmm.
And
they knew what they knew what the outcome that was expected.
Yeah. And
they were excited about it.
Yeah. I think each and every one of them felt very important.
Yeah. Because well, I'm sure they probably were.
And they were important, but I like that whole feeling, that whole idea of look what we've done.
Yep. Well, there's some really interesting research on motivation, and I always think of the acronym PAM, for purpose, autonomy, and mastery. Okay. And the people are most highly motivated when the work they do or the task gives them a sense of purpose.
Sure.
All right. So you've talked any number of times about how you felt about the Newsweek, and like, wow, I know stuff that nobody else knows, and I am informing the general population about that, and this is a worthwhile thing. You felt you were doing something positive.
At 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning after working all those hours, and you knew that it was going to the presses.
Right.
And we had reported on some stories that people didn't know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, this was before the internet.
Sure.
But yeah, it was a feeling. I would get in that cab, because when I lived out here, they sent me home in a cab. I would get in that cab and be tired as hell, and thinking,
yeah, but feel so satisfied.
Wow, we did it.
Yep.
We did it. Whoa, another week.
Yeah, and you're not going to get a sense of accomplishment if you didn't think what you were doing was meaningful.
Right.
Right? I mean, if you accomplished a result, yeah, I got it, but, who cares?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, we knew it was meaningful because of the communications that would come back into the company.
Mm-hmm.
And even from the people that were upset with some of the stuff we did.
Yeah.
And called us names and stuff like that in the letters, we knew.
Well, they weren't indifferent, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Right?
We knew that, we're doing something.
Yeah, you were hitting a nerve.
And I think that company, like a lot of companies should be, made people feel that they were important in what they did. It comes from the top.
Yes, it does.
And if the top was, all the editors and I were good friends. We talked a lot. We drank a lot.
Yeah.
But we also knew when the time comes to do the work, we did the work.
Well, yeah, and the other piece of that again is autonomy.
Sure.
You were given the freedom to get it done.
Right.
As opposed to having someone standing over you, directing your every minute.
And I would not even have stayed if that would have been the case.
Right. But that is the case for a lot of people.
And that's unfortunate, because I think people have brains.
Pardon?
People have brains.
Yeah.
Show them what you need, and then get out of their way. Because everybody's going to do, maybe you'll disagree with me, everybody's going to do something a little different.
I don't disagree with you, but it's a question of trust.
True, it is.
Okay, and the problem, there's a fundamental paradox with management in that you're held responsible for what other people do, but you can't control what they do.
No.
You can influence it. You got a lot of ways to influence it, right? But fundamentally, you can't control it, and it's going to reflect on you.
Exactly.
And therefore, a lot of people, and I've worked for micromanagers that, just basically you couldn't make a decision because that person was so terrified that it was going to come back and reflect negatively on them.
One of the things I used to say a lot, we're going to do it this way, and if there's anybody got any questions next week, I'm the one that said it. So, if they're coming in here, I tell my people.
Yeah, it's on me.
It comes back to me, not to you.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that I was very fortunate, I had some really good people, and when somebody new came in, they wanted to be a part of this group that was doing these things.
Yeah, well,
so,
you had a very positive group.
I did, extremely positive.
Yeah, I mean, stop and think about it. If you have someone who you don't have confidence in to do the work effectively, you're not going to let them go.
No.
Right?
I'm going to watch over them as close as I can.
Yeah, you're going to watch until they either become competent or you decide that you can't live with this, or you decide you will live with this and you continue to provide them pretty close supervision, right? Yeah.
But I never had that problem.
Well,
I was lucky.
Yeah.
I was lucky. So I never had that problem. I had people that really wanted to be a part of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And that's the other piece of it, and that's the third component. So you got purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
And the third piece of it is mastery, which is a sense of I'm becoming better at this. I'm growing.
Sure.
I'm becoming really good at doing something that I feel is important doing. And you put those three together, and those are, to my mind, the three most critical components of two things. They're the most critical components of a person being engaged, and they're the most critical components of a person feeling positive about what they're doing with their career.
It freaked me out a few times when I heard people making statements that I'd made.
Okay. They were echoing you?
Yes, echoing me, and I was like, oh, listen to that.
Yeah. I guess you were having some influence on them.
Well, I tried I was so laid back that I think they thought I was probably more into watching what they're doing than I was.
Okay.
And I trusted these people. If they're going to do a layout, they're going to do it. If they got a problem, they're going to speak up. I've got a problem over here. Oh, okay.
They're not going to hide it.
Yeah. They're not going to try to slip something through or anything like that. I've got a problem. I can't get this to work. Let's all look at it.
You were in a unique environment, though, because because you had two very good things going for you. And I got to also say, I'm sure that environment's not made for everybody, because the pace that you were living in was
very fast-paced. Yes,
and not everyone thrives in that. But you had a relatively short cycle, right?
Yes,
and there was a clear outcome that you had to reach each time, each cycle. It was very clear, right? And there was pressure.
Yes,
there was pressure.
There was a lot of pressure.
Right.
And the thing I think, and I've said this many times, one of the reasons I like that job is when you're working against the clock's moving even faster. But you could be there 12, 15 hours and not even realize it.
No one was sitting there watching the clock.
Yeah. Because you're just going crazy, getting this done. And then when it's done, yes. I used to make lists. We need to do this, and I'd love to cross stuff off the list.
Yep.
Here's our list for this week.
One step closer.
And we just cross people, or other people would come over and cross, they did that, cross stuff off. I loved it. I like to see that list totally crossed off.
Yeah, get it narrowed down, and every step was taking you closer to what you were trying to accomplish.
And that was, but I was very fortunate because all the people that worked with me all felt the same way.
Well, without, maybe intentionally or not, maybe your idea of I'm going to hire someone who wants my job, who has that ambition or drive in them, you got people who thrived in that situation.
I did. I had people that just loved it, and I tell you, it's crazy. We could be almost finished with the magazines, and then something happens overseas or whatever.
Right, and you have to scramble to get it.
And it might be 4 o'clock in the morning, and I see people who looked very tired come right alive and say, "Oh, give me that one. I'll do this," and you know, just go scrambling.
Yeah.
And I think they enjoyed that more than anything else.
Well, you know, it probably it was a sense of excitement
And
right?
accomplishment, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah, sure.
And I think in the workforce, you got to offer people that accomplishment.
Right. Yeah, no question about it. And when you stop and think about it, if you think of those 3 elements of autonomy, mastery, and purpose,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those they come under the heading of ownership.
Sure.
Because if you're the owner of your own organization or your own business or whatever, you've got autonomy. Hopefully you're doing something that gives you a sense of meaning.
Sure.
And thirdly, there's a sense, hopefully, again, of growing and becoming better and better and better at what you're doing. At least the opportunity is there for you to do it. If you don't, shame on you.
True.
Right?
True. I agree.
So I think those 3 things fit very nicely under the idea of making sure people have a sense of ownership for what they do. And, you know, that is what's missing a lot in today's organizations. It really is. So.
Yeah, that's a shame because I think Time, who was just 2 blocks over from us, operated in the same way we did.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that because writers would jump back and forth.
Would they?
Yeah. You know, sometimes the writer would leave and he'd be at Time and then he'd be back over with us later. And, you know, they used to.
They could jump around.
Yeah. And we had a good relationship, even though that was our biggest competition.
Time
Magazine.
Yeah, sure.
But we had a good relationship with the people from Time.
Yeah, and I'm sure people move back and forth in a lot of different positions.
Mostly writers. The writers were
Really?
would.
Why do you think that profession was more mobile?
I'm not sure, but I used to watch writers come and go.
Okay.
And sometimes the writers would come. Sometimes we'd bring somebody from overseas that had been a stringer, which a stringer is basically like a freelance person.
Right.
But if something's going on in Germany, we'll call so-and-so. He's our stringer there. So he wasn't on the payroll 24/7, but when he needed him, he would be there.
Right.
Well, then I'd see the writers coming in from overseas and taking up a spot.
Okay.
And it was like a jump up. And then, of course, well, when Entertainment, what's the name of that magazine? Entertainment Today or something?
Yeah, Entertainment Weekly or something like
that.
I get it mixed up with the TV show.
They contacted me and a couple of people who worked for me to see if I wanted to work for them. And I went over and they said, I said, maybe I'd be interested. And they said, what's your salary? And I said it, and the woman said, we already have an editor.
Thank you very much.
And my biggest thing, we get paid an awful lot of money. But I think they paid a lot of money to people they wanted to keep. And they got you hooked on that money.
Well, people they wanted to keep, and they wanted, they wanted you to know that you were being paid well, because that means that you're not being taken for granted and that there's an appreciation for what you're doing.
I think I've told you this before. At the end of any day, which could be 16, 18 hours, everybody that worked with me, I would say, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. Just thank you. That was really, you did a great job today. I think people really appreciate that.
I think that's more important than you did a good job. Okay.
Yeah, so thank you.
I really appreciate what you did. It's saying, obviously, you're going to be more appreciative of good work than you will work that's not good, but it's different because it's less evaluative. It's less of, I'm sitting here judging you and you did a good job. Mm-hmm. It's more of, hey, that was valuable and I value what you did, right?
Yep.
And it has a different tone to it.
I really loved those people.
I know.
I loved them. They were, like I said, we were a family.
Mm-hmm.
And once it all got broken up, there's only a couple that I stay in touch with.
Well, did you ever watch that show, Newsweek? Newsroom?
Newsroom, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, because that's the same kind of environment. And, very fast pace, having to produce a result, and you're on a deadline. You got to move, right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
And you don't want to publish anything that's not checked,
right,
and not double checked and triple checked,
right,
because you don't want to put something out there that's false, like some
like election returns or things like that.
Oh, election returns, we'd be there all night.
Yeah,
it would be. But that was always a big, because we'd be there all night, but food would come in like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They'd bring food in, and once it was over, the drinks would be there. And,
everything was ready for you.
Yeah, and you knew, okay, we're going to knock this out, but we're going to have a nice time afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I think people are very similar to animals. That reward system,
Well, I think it's more for me, it's more the rewards that people give themselves. Okay.
Okay.
That if you stop and think about it, the autonomy and purpose, those are things that are internally generated.
Mm-hmm.
The people have to find that, and this is why, coming full circle, for young people, my advice is always to them: find something that you're interested in.
Sure.
Whether it be people, or ideas, or data, or things, right? Those are the big categories, and then start to explore what you can do in those areas, and go out and test them. First of all, go out and talk to people about what they are doing in those areas, and then go out and test them. I had a young person a number of years ago who was doing very well. They were writing standard reports, market report on trends in the real estate industry, and the person was very well regarded, young woman, and she hated what she was doing. She hated it, but she was living in New York. She had the lifestyle. She wanted to maintain it.
Sure.
And so she was paying a price for that, and I took her through a process, and we looked at it, and the conclusion she came to when we looked at the whole thing was, she said, I should be in marketing. And because of what her interests were and what her skills were, and so we put together a strategy for her to begin to explore that. And I said, look, you're in a good situation now because you're very well regarded doing what you're doing. That, to some degree, puts you in the catbird seat if you want to try to move over into the marketing area. They're going to you're in a much better position, let's say, if you were a subpar performer and say, I want to move over there. Okay? They value what you're doing from what you're telling me. They think very highly of you. Mm-hmm. You need to move now while you've got some of that leverage. And initially, she was saying that she thought she had to go back to, I'm going to have to go back to school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, I don't really think so.
Yeah.
I really don't think you're going to have to, but go talk to some people who are in the field of marketing now. Find out what they're doing. See if you think that sounds like, if it resonates with you, if that would appeal to you. And then talk to people in your organization. Again, think of it as as a spider web, not as a straight path. Because the path she was on was not going to take her into marketing. And she's now in a very, very positive position in marketing, and loves what she's doing. And she's doing very, very well. And for me, it makes me feel good because I feel like I helped her, sort that out.
I had a young guy who went to Columbia, worked part-time for me,
mm-hmm.
came to me and said, my grandmother died and left me some money, and I'm thinking about hitchhiking across Europe. And I said, well, you know what you ought to do? You ought to do it.
Now.
Because 10 years from now, you're going to say, why didn't I do that?
Mm-hmm.
So he did. He even hitchhiked across the Sahara Desert.
How do you hitchhike across the
there's-
Sahara?
There's
Sahara, I mean.
there's a couple of major roads,
Are there really?
and then there's what's those things called that have
Water holes?
Yeah, the water hole or what? And at each one of those was an army
Oasis, I think. it is.
oasis, and each one of those was an army group,
Yeah. Okay.
and so he could sleep with them, eat
Okay.
with them, and they loved. And he played guitar.
But did he ever get, like, not be able to get to an oasis?
No,
in the time?
no, he did it.
was
He
able
just
to make
had
it
a great
across?
time. He was about 9 months, and he called me back and said, "I'm going back to Columbia." I said, "Well, you want to come back and work part-time again?" He said, "Sure." So he now is living in Ireland,
Okay.
but this was a guy who was just exploring.
Yeah.
And exploring and thinking, what do I want to do? He played guitar, he played banjo. He stayed in England in a lot of monasteries
Mm-hmm.
with these priests, and they used to play guitars at night and stuff, and he'd get fed for free. He said,
Yeah.
I had
What
a
kind of
great
an-
time.
Yeah. What kind of an experience? How many people get the opportunity to have experiences
But when he
like
told
that?
me that, I said, "You got to
Do it now. Yeah.
You don't have any. You don't have any commitments. Just go out and do it.
Yeah.
Take that money and consider it well spent."
Yeah.
And I think he came back with money, to tell you the truth.
Okay. Yeah, but yeah, it really is for young people. It is, they do have to explore it, and they have to
Yeah.
find out what works for them. And I just shudder when I see kids forcing themselves to do things that, they're doing it for reasons, God knows why. Something, it's like, well, my parents wanted me to do
Yeah,
this,
exactly what I was thinking.
or
My parents thought that this is what I should do.
Right, exactly, and it's like, nah, you got to live with this decision.
Yeah.
You are the one who's got to live with this decision, and for me, like, work is too important. It's too important, and it's too much of a source of meaning and satisfaction for me to spend it doing stuff that I don't feel good about.
And it's a lot of wasted time if you're doing it with stuff you don't feel good about.
Well, I honestly think that's where most of a lot of people are in that beat, but it's it's a paycheck, and they look at it as a means to an end, and I just refuse to do it that way.
I'll tell you, I know another young lady who used to answer phones for me at another radio station,
Mm-hmm.
and she was going to RVCC. Well, she'd started with me when she was in high school. She wanted to do radio.
Okay.
She got involved with Panera and said, "I like this a lot more."
Really?
Yeah. So she's now looking to open her own Panera.
Her own franchise.
Yes. She became the manager, the one right here,
Okay.
and just said she graduated from RVCC, but didn't go on. She just stayed with Panera because she started working part-time with them,
Okay.
and then just said, "I love this." So she found something that
Yes.
works for her.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I'm really happy for her.
Mm-hmm.
And she had, like when she was younger, thought radio would be the thing she wanted to do. Well, that's not important to her anymore.
Well, you start off thinking one thing.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to become a lawyer when I went to school.
Really?
Because, it sounded good. My dad had always said he wanted to be a lawyer. If he had to do again, he would have gone into labor law. And that's 90% of the kids I went to undergraduate school went on to law school. And it just was until I took my first law course and absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
I hated it.
And that's unfortunate, like I said before earlier, about the way they're taking kids in high school and saying, you got to decide. No, get out there and find out what you want to do. As you're saying,
Well, explore it.
explore it.
And,
If you-
find out what really interests you.
Yeah.
What kind of,
Not just because somebody says, hey, that's a good job.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for me, life is too short. And when I found myself saying that at a company when I was working, that was the sign that I was starting to put one foot out the door.
Mm-hmm.
When I stopped feeling that I was making a contribution that mattered, okay,
Right.
and that I could feel good about. And it goes back to I just wasn't satisfied bringing home a paycheck. I wanted more from what I did than that.
Exactly. I totally understand that. And I think unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there just living with the paycheck.
Yeah, I think they feel trapped.
Yeah, I think they probably do.
You know.
My father felt that way.
Yeah.
He hated, but he was circumstances.
Yeah, he hit. There was a certain reality to his situation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I still contend, for most people, you're only really trapped if you define yourself as being trapped.
True.
And people they see just the obstacles and they don't see a way of overcoming them. And that's when they give in. And I just, to me, it doesn't strike me as real healthy.
No.
Maybe it's just the way I was brought up.
No, but I think I agree.
Yeah.
I think I agree. We're almost out of time.
Okay.
And I'm sorry I talked too much about my job.
No, because your experience was, I think, very relevant to what I'm talking about, because you obviously got a lot of. It was a very positive experience for you. I mean, you talked so positively about it.
Definitely a positive experience.
And
I was very lucky to have fallen into that.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't.
I was very lucky to have fallen into it and enjoyed it. And even today, when I see news on the TV, I'm thinking, how would we do it?
Okay.
How would we do this?
Yeah.
So it's always, and also, I watch the news a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's just
it's in your blood.
Yeah. You used to sit there, and I love those old. When I came to Newsweek, they still had some of those old writers that wore the garters on their sleeves.
Okay.
And the suspenders.
Right.
And these old guys, I mean, they were terrific.
Yeah.
They were hard-hitting, really gutsy old guys.
It's kind of a dying breed, isn't it?
Yeah, that's gone.
Yeah.
But they were fun to listen to.
Oh, I'm sure they had stories.
Oh. You go to any city and try to go to the press club. If you got a press, and you go to the press club and you'll hear I don't know if I believed half the stories, but
who cares?
Yeah, it was just amazing.
Yeah,
these guys would talk about the people they met
and the experiences they've had.
Yeah. No, it was good. It was a very positive situation for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. You're lucky. You're one of the lucky ones, Richard.
I lucked out, actually. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, like I said, a lot of people, they stop searching. They give up.
That's why That's why you talked about your daughter. I'm very happy with my daughter because she knew she wanted to do something, and now she's teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And she's very happy with what she's doing.
Good.
And as I said, my son, who wasn't sure, and I never pushed him to go to school right away.
Yep.
He's 28 years old. He's going to graduate. But he's still teaching karate.
Yep.
And working with little kids. But he's also enjoys going to middle school and substitute teaching.
Yeah.
So if I think if your kids can be happy, that's the best thing that could happen.
I think that's what we want for all of our kids, isn't it? When
just
really
to be happy and enjoy what they're doing. And my daughter does enjoy her teaching, and I know my son's going to enjoy it too.
Yeah. Yeah, makes a difference. A lot fuller life.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I know for a fact because I enjoyed what I did.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing. I think once you've got a taste of it, you're more willing to let your kids find their own way.
Sure.
Because you know the difference between what it's like when you do experience that versus when you don't.
And it's a scary thing having kids and saying, "Oh my God," all the stuff they got to go through. But
yeah, I know.
To look back now, my kids are 28 and 30. Well, my daughter's 31 today. Happy birthday, Katrina!
Excellent.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
She'll be coming in next week, so we'll celebrate next Tuesday, I think, or Wednesday when she comes in.
That sounds good.
But yeah, to know that they're happy and they're doing what they want to do, because
something that makes them feel good about themselves.
Exactly, and that's what work should be. And I think you're exactly right with helping kids or people starting out.
Well, I see this pressure on kids to make decisions before it's unrealistic. They don't have enough information. They haven't had the experience.
I agree. Well, that's our time's up.
Okay.
David, it's good seeing you.
Good to see you too, Richard. As always.
You'll be back here in 2 weeks.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Take care.
Bruce Pearson will be on later tonight, so please stay tuned to that. And I'm going to bow out right now. That's it. The mics are off.
Good.
Now I just got to shut everything down.
How's Bruce doing?
Well,
Did he have any luck?